Insidious is a franchise that started off pretty decently with decent critical and audience ratings and scores. And then with each movie, the scores went progressively down. But for me, the opposite holds true. I actually liked the franchise the more the movies went on. I know, that's weird. It's not something that happens very often, but for whatever reason, I have grown to appreciate these movies as they have gone on. So the first movie has the highest critical and audience reviews from what I can remember. Not super stellar, like 60s, mid 60s, whatever-ish. And then Insidious 2 came down, and then 3, and then 4, and I think they've just gone progressively down or stayed about the same-ish with each entry, like 50s, 40s, whatever. But for me, the more the movies went on, the better the stories got. So I like the first movie, okay. It was all right. There were some parts about it that I felt were kind of clunky and just weren't handled very well. Some of the way scenes were shot. And James Wan directed that one too, which is surprising that that one is not my favorite one. He also directed the second one. That one's okay. I like it maybe about as much as the first. If I like it more, it's just a skosh more. But when the third movie came around, I liked it quite a bit. And I thought it was pretty decent. Then the fourth movie came along, and I liked that one even more. Then the fifth movie, I just got back home from watching it not long ago, and I liked this one even more than movies 1 and 2. So in the storyline of the Insidious movies, if you don't know already, I might touch on some spoilery stuff about the previous movies. It starts off with, I can't remember the name of the family. Patrick Wilson, his wife, the family there, Barlow or something. I can't remember. Starts with a B, I think. The first two movies deal with their family. And Lynn Shay plays a character who comes in and helps them in the first movie, and she's also present in the second movie. She is actually the one actor who has been present throughout all of the movies, from what I can remember, unless she has these two guys that kind of tag along with her, like they're these ghost hunter guys. They're kind of like the comic relief of the franchise. They were in multiple movies, but I don't remember if they were in the first one. Anyway, if memory serves, she's been the constant throughout the whole franchise. That's one of the ghost hunter guys back there in the background. So I liked how, as the stories progressed, in 3, maybe 4 as well, and specifically 4, they showed tie-ins to the other movies, to the first 2 movies, and you see, oh, okay, well, that's what caused this particular thing. Because, well, I don't know if that was the plan all along, but they went and wrote certain things that show up in movies 3 and 4, maybe just whatever. They show these things as having been things that were going on in the first 2 movies that you just didn't understand what the explanation was. So I thought that was nifty. I liked that. And like I said, like the comedy with the ghost hunter characters, like the backstory with the character played by Lynn Shay. And when this movie wasn't, well, okay, so first of all, a couple weeks ago, I went to go see a Regal Mystery Movie Monday, and I was doggone sure it was going to be the next Insidious movie. So in preparation for that, I had several days to play with. I rewatched Insidious 1, and then I watched 2, 3, and 4 in rapid succession, all ready to go for Insidious 5, and the Mystery Movie Monday was not Insidious 5. So I was bummed about that, but I decided, well, doggone, I've seen the first 4 movies. I may as well go ahead and watch movie number 5. And so that's why I ended up going to see this film. Now let me get to the stuff about this movie, the pros that I had. And there were mostly pros, actually, not many cons. I like that they tie in specifically to events of movies 1 and 2. And I like that the original cast has returned. Well, most of the original cast. Little Dalton is all grown up. This kid is so cute. And he grows up into such a cute young man and such a good actor too. And I think one of the reasons I feel kind of fond of him is because he reminds me of a guy that we met at a local comic convention, an anime comic convention. And it was our first convention. It was his first convention. And so ever since then, we make a point of meeting up with each other to say hi, take some pictures, catch up with each other every time we're at the same con. And grown-up Dalton, which is the same actor as Little Dalton, he reminds me a lot of that guy. So anyway, I just have this feeling of affection for him. It's kind of funny. I appreciated the writing in here. I feel like it's even more solid than some of the stuff that we got from the first two movies. I like that it's got most of the same cast. I like that it shows, so basically, I think it was at the end of the second movie, Dalton and his father, they were hypnotized so that they would forget the things that happened, or also so that they would forget or not be able to tap into their ability to astral project, because that's what the premise of all these stories is about, people who can astral project. And when they astral project, they end up in this place that is kind of like, it's like a haunting ground. A bunch of bad entities are hanging around there and they want to try to find a way into the real world. That's the premise of the whole thing. So they got hypnotized, but as opposed to it helping them, it caused problems. It caused problems with Patrick Wilson's character because it just kind of messed with his ability to just function. Because of that, it caused problems between him and his wife. Also problems between him and his son. So I like continued ramifications of things from the earlier movies that have carried through to 10 years later. And we pick up with the family at that point. So Insidious movie 3 deals with a completely separate family, completely separate issue. Then Insidious movie 4 is some backstory to Lin Shaye's character. And at the end of Insidious 4, it leads right into the events of the first movie. So you see how all these things tie in together. And now we're 10 years later after the events of the first movie, and this is the situation we're plopped into. Little Dalton has grown up, he's going off to college, and he starts to deal with things. I like how they wrote how these things started coming back to be a factor in their lives. I thought that was handled pretty well. I like the conflict that it showed between Patrick Wilson's character and Dalton, and it was mostly focused on Patrick Wilson's character and his son Dalton. There is some focus on the wife, but the relationship that was damaged a lot was their relationship because of the shared experience that they had, that they've gone and forgotten, and they don't know they just can't quite put their finger on why things are just so fragmented in their lives. So I like how that is woven into the storyline. I liked also there was a quote that was said that I thought was interesting, and it can apply to many people's lives, I think, with regard to struggles and hardships that we've all gone through. And one of the characters said, in regards to trying to block out or completely forget this particular thing, this character said, we need to remember even the things that hurt. Because in a lot of ways, the experiences we've gone through in our life, that's what shape us. It can shape us for the better or for the worst. A lot of times really awful experiences can shape people for the worst, but sometimes those same experiences, if they happen to another person, can mold their lives in a very positive way. So there's kind of this balance, you know. You don't want to focus on and obsess over things in your past that were harmful or times of trial and tribulation. You don't want to focus on that to the point that it prevents you from moving forward with your life, but it is important also to remember these things and yet at the same time stay grounded, if that makes any sense. Anyway, it might not, but I just like that quote. I appreciated the message it was trying to get across. There is a post-credit scene at the end of this, but honestly, you guys, I don't know if it's worth sticking around for it. I am kind of annoyed that I stuck around for it because I thought it was going to be an actual scene that's going to last a little bit, at least. And it was nothing. It was probably over in like a second or two. So I don't know. I've heard that there are already plans to proceed with either another movie or some type of spinoff. I'm not sure if that's really going to happen. I wouldn't mind it if it does, as long as it's as well written as the later movies have been. The characters in here, I wanted to say, if you guys didn't know, that Patrick Wilson actually directed this one, and I thought he did a solid job as a director. No complaints, really. I don't know, was this his first movie he's ever directed? Because if so, I thought he did a pretty decent job. So kudos to him for that. Something else I totally forgot to mention was that not only did Patrick Wilson direct this movie, but he also sang the song at the very end that plays through the initial credits. So if you don't want to stick around for this very lame-ass post-credit scene at the end of everything, you might want to stick around just to hear his singing during the initial credits. He has a great voice. Thought he did a wonderful job. Okay, that was it. Back to the video. I was going to talk about the characters. So I like the characters that we already have, that have already been established, but there's a new character, that girl right there. So she is someone that Dalton meets when he goes to college. They become friends. And for most of the movie, I liked her character. She had funny lines of dialogue. She was quirky. I thought she did a pretty good job with the acting. But then there was this scene that happens a little bit after we get to know the character. I don't know, maybe halfway-ish through. And this is a tad spoilery, but I'll explain why I didn't like what they had her character do in this particular scene. There's this scene where she and Dalton are interacting with this frat boy guy, and he's kind of douchey. He's not all bad, because later he does something that kind of, redeems himself a bit, but he's kind of douchey. He's an asshole. He says something mean to her. It was not very nice. It was not kind. It wasn't, he was being an asshole. And in this particular scene, when he says these things to her, she then kicks him in the nuts. And he, of course, doubles over. And they run off, and this is supposed to be so funny. I was very glad to notice that nobody in the theater thought that was a funny moment. Nobody laughed, and it actually pissed me off, because things like that annoy me, that for some reason it's considered really hilarious that an assholey guy gets kicked in that area or harmed in that area, and this is so hilarious. Could you imagine if the roles were reversed and a woman was being an asshole to a guy and he kicked her right there in the privates? Can you imagine? Would that go over well? No, it wouldn't go over very well. So why do people constantly feel like, writers, why do they constantly feel like this sort of scenario is going to play well? It somehow is deemed completely forgivable to assault an asshole guy, physically assault a guy just for using his mouth and being an idiot, saying stupid things, as opposed to if a girl does and she would get socked for saying mean things. That wouldn't be deemed okay. It almost never happens, and yet it happens so often with male characters, and that really annoys me. Now, he was douchey, he was an idiot. I didn't like him in that particular scene, but when her character did that, I didn't like her for doing that. And that started to affect how I felt about her as a character for the rest of the movie. I liked her fine up until that point. Then she was a complete idiot. And then I didn't care too much for her after that. So as far as cons, that was really the only major con. And that was just more, just like with another movie I recently reviewed, Extraction 2, that was just more an issue that I had with the character as a person, as opposed to an issue with the actual writing for this. Now, it is an issue with the writing, but what I mean is, as opposed to the overall story and the overall quality of the movie, that was just, that character was an idiot. I didn't like her. That particular scene damaged my feeling about her as a person. And so that was just like, there was only one little tiny con thing that I mentioned, and it was they're in a room, and this like a medical room, and in real life, this room would never be dim around the edges. It would be brightly lit all the time. And in this particular room, before anything scary starts to happen, It's only lit around where the actors are, the edges of the room, the periphery of the room. It's all dim and dark. That would, no. I wish they would not do things like that in horror movies, that they would make typically very bright areas in real life be somehow dim and dark. Like you see that happen all the time in horror movies that take place in hospitals or hotels or something, where they make the hallways dark and scary, and that's not a thing in real life. Hospital hallways are bright. They're not dark. Don't make them dark in a horror movie. It will lend a little bit more credibility to the movie if they won't do things like that, because that is so stereotypical. It is so tropey. But those are the only things that I marked as actual cons for this movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was decent. I wasn't annoyed with it, despite those little tiny things I mentioned. I thought the writing was pretty good. I liked the family dynamic. I like that this movie wasn't completely taken over by the supernatural entities and elements and stuff. It was very heavy into the family drama and dynamic between father and son, and as they are trying to remember certain things from their past that they've forgotten. So it's basically like they have to relearn all these other things that we already saw them go through in the first two movies. But I feel like it was done in a pretty good way. It felt fresh. And also Patrick Wilson's character finds out more about his past too that he didn't know about even in the first two movies. So I liked how it was handled and enjoyed the film as a whole. If you like the other Insidious movies, I was on a live stream today with Mike and some other people on his channel. Did you see that? And Elliot was on there and he was talking about how, Elliot from IMO Reviews, and he was talking about how he shouldn't like these movies, but he generally does. He has liked the movies. So I'm curious, Elliot, when you get around to watching it, what you think about it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was decent and don't really have any huge complaints. I actually might even end up buying this series, because after I went back and rewatched 1 and then I watched 2, 3, and 4, and my appreciation for it grew as the movies went on, and then I watched this and it wasn't an utter fail for me, I started to think, you know what, I wouldn't mind adding this to my collection, and I might do that. So yeah, anyway, thumbs up, enjoyed it, decent horror flick, and let me know what you think if you ever get around to watching it. If you hated it, if you loved it, whatever. It feels like one of the more solid horror movie franchises. That's it. I don't have anything else, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Bye.